Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Rocket Chiro Podcast, the business and marketing podcast for chiropractors. My name is Jerry. I'm your host. Welcome back to this podcast series for new chiropractors and chiropractors that are struggling. This is the 10th podcast in the series, and I think that I'm going to end it here. I actually had notes for an 11th episode, but it sort of overlaps with the podcast that I just did before this series. And so I'm just going to touch on it, and then I'm going to refer you back to that one. So we're sort of going to do a little bit of a 2-for-1 on this particular episode. What I want to talk about in this episode is the importance of praise, the importance of saying thank you, because this is one of those things that you just want to keep in mind as you're in practice, because it's easy to forget, and it is something that will benefit you long term. Now, before I go any further, just want to say, if you want some additional help, check out my Next Step program at rocketchiro.com. If you want a better website, go to Rocket Chiro and check out the Rocket Chiropractic websites. You'll be glad that you did. So this may go without saying, but you are not going to be successful by yourself. You're just not. If you try to be successful by yourself, you're going to fail, or there's just going to be a really low ceiling on what you can accomplish. And even if by yourself, meaning you do a micro practice, which I'm perfectly fine with. I don't mean you can't have a micro practice, but you can't be a successful chiropractor without patients. Those people have to participate in their care. You're going to have people that refer to you. You're going to have people that leave you reviews. You're going to have people that open up doors for you within your community. Even online, you have people that like and that comment and subscribe. I mean, this podcast I'm just some weirdo talking to myself in my basement if nobody listens to the podcast. And so even if you're a solopreneur and you are a micro practice and you don't have staff, that does not mean that you live in a world where you are on an island and your success is all of your own doing. There are going to be times in your life and in your practice where people do things for you that you don't even deserve. It's amazing interacting with people, what will happen at times. And sometimes when you're just least expected, someone can do the most amazing thing. And on the flip side of that, there's going to be plenty of times where you want people to do something that they're just not going to do. And it's going to be sort of disappointing. And something I would also say as a bonus to this podcast episode is don't carry the weight of that as a chiropractor. Like, don't carry the weight of other people's decisions. You may know that you can help them and they just decide not to. You may know that what's best for them and they may decide to do something different. That's the nature of human beings. That's just, you put 10 people in a room and they're not going to agree on everything. You put 2 people in a room. That's why marriage is difficult. You put 2 people in a house and they don't always agree on things. They often don't agree on things. And so don't carry the burden of making decisions for your patients. We talked about persuasion on the podcast before, where it's like, yeah, you do want to make it easy for people to make good decisions. But even if you do everything right and they make the wrong decision, that's not on you. But when people do make choices that benefit you and they do things that really help you, say thank you. Be grateful. Don't take that for granted. No one has to help you. No one has to let you help them. No one has to do any of those things. And if they didn't do those things, you would not have the job that you love. You would not have the opportunity to be the chiropractor that you went all that time to go to school and all this effort to learn how to do this stuff and to be a chiropractor. And you're not going to have that opportunity if people don't help you along the way. So just make sure you say thank you. And it doesn't have to be big. And this is true for staff also. This is true for staff. This is true for networking relationships. This is true for anything and everything. When someone does something that benefits you, that you appreciate, that it helps you out, say thank you. And it doesn't have to be huge. And some people, it might be bigger than others. I've heard of chiropractors where they have relationships with like a lawyer, and that lawyer sends them a lot of business and they buy that law office, like a pizza party for the law office, or they send over some edible arrangements or what. I don't know. You may have a patient that is an amazing patient and they've referred 10 or 15 people to you in a year. And maybe over the course of that year, you've said thank you to them when you've seen them. But maybe at the end of the year, you're like, you know what? I'm just going to do something nice for them. I'm going to buy, her and her husband a nice gift card to a steak restaurant. Not because I have to, not because we have an agreement, not because I bribed them to do it, but just because I appreciate it. And say, hey, I just wanted to give you this. I love that you tell people about me. And frankly, it helps my practice so much, and it gives me the opportunity to help more people. Thank you. And you could publicly thank people. You could take pictures of people and tag them online, obviously, if they're okay with that. Chiropractors years ago used to have like a thank you board in their practice where they would have names written down of like first name, last initial of people that have referred. Thank you. I've seen people do that in email newsletters. I've seen people do it online. I've seen people do it in print newsletters where they'll have a list of people that referred and they're saying thank you. I have purposely and publicly thanked people in my office where I was going to thank someone for doing something or referring or for leaving a review or whatever it is that I was thanking them for. And I was strategically waiting so that they were going to be in the waiting room with other people around so that I could praise them, not only to them, but other people could hear this as well, where they would be lifted up publicly. There are different ways to do it. Some of them, I've bought things for people just to say thank you. I've bought little things for people to say thank you. It doesn't have to be big. And if you're broke and you're just getting started, I don't recommend that you go more broke buying gifts for people. But say thank you. Posting something online, it doesn't cost you anything. Saying thank you to the person's face, sending them a text, picking up the phone and calling them. I know that that's an old school thing to do, but just say thank you. And if you have staff, it's going to be a little more official with staff. I would recommend bonusing your staff. I would recommend bonusing your staff based on income, not based on anything else. I'm a huge advocate of setting up the whole payment structure for your staff based on the income of the practice and how much the practice grows from the time that they are there. I'm a huge fan of that. If your practice is averaging, $20,000 a month in income and you hire someone and you start making 21 or 22 or 25 or 27, that person should be making more money. And I personally would set it up to where they're making more money relative to how much money the practice is making. And if we're making $20,000 when I hire them and then 2 years later we're still making $20,000, I honestly don't feel compelled to give them any more money. I'm not making any more money. The whole point of this is to grow it. Now you may do that. I'm not saying don't. I'm not saying don't bonus your staff just because they work there, but I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm a huge fan of saying, look, if we grow, you get to make more money. If I make more money, you make more money. And you may say it differently than that, but that's the idea. There's buy-in there. There's appreciation there. They don't feel like, hey, man, I started here. We're seeing 50 patients a week. Now we're seeing 100 and I'm making the exact same amount of money. You're asking them to do twice the amount of work. Don't do that. What are you doing? That's not gratitude. That's not grateful. That's not, I don't even use the word fair. Life's not fair. Whatever. They agreed to what they agreed to. But say thank you. Networking partners, referral partners. I'm a huge fan of doing a VIP list within the context of your practice. Know who your referrers are. Know who your most valuable people are. If you want to send them a print newsletter, just as a way of keeping in touch with them, that's something my Next Step members will do. We have that print newsletter that we do that gives you an excuse to reach out to people that are your VIPs. You could send them a little thank you. You could send them a little gift. Not every patient is the same. The ones that are most valuable, most helpful, do something to say. Show some gratitude. Last thing we'll talk about is this, and this was the podcast that I did before. I did a podcast that was called How to Be Great, What to Do When You Suck. The basic idea is this: lean into your strengths, delegate the stuff that's important that you suck at. People generally do not go from sucking to being great. People go from good to great. So when you look at your, like, where can I make the most progress? It's important to be aware of your strengths. What are the things that you're naturally gifted at? That things that come a little bit easier to you than they do to other people. What are the things that are in that category that will move the needle for your practice? If you did that particular thing at a really high level, it would really benefit your practice. Those things you have to identify, and those are the things that you want to lean into. You want to be great at something that's going to move the needle in your practice. I keep joking about juggling. Being great at juggling, unless you can figure out a way to make that into a practice thing, and maybe you can, juggling, chiropractor, whatever. But be great at something. And if you're going to be great at something, you're probably going to be naturally gifted in that area. There's also going to be a bunch of things, like for me, it's taxes and accounting. I hate all that stuff. I'm no interest in it. I'm actually really, this ironic thing is that I'm really good at math. I genuinely hate it. I hate it. I have no interest in doing it. And so because of that, it is important that I do my taxes. It is important that my accounting gets done. It is important that the numbers make sense. I have an accountant. That's what I pay them for. I delegate that to them. The reason I hired staff right out of the gate when I was in practice, and the reason I never practiced completely by myself, is because I hated answering the phone. Nowadays, with texting and online scheduling, I would probably consider working by myself. But when I was practicing back in the dark ages when nobody had any fun, there was you just did phone calls. I hate answering the phone. I do not want to answer the phone. That's a massive hindrance to a chiropractic practice. And it's something that's important that I'm not good at. I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do. So I delegated it. So that's going to be the principle going forward with if you want to understand kind of where to put your energy, how to structure things and whatnot, is identify the things that are important and then look at your skill set. What can I do exceptionally well? I'm going to focus on those things that are important. That's what I'm going to do. The other things that are important, things like your website. Hey, have me do your website. You don't need to do your website. It's silly. 99% of chiropractors don't need to do their website. There's no reason to. Have somebody else do it. If you need help with accounting, have somebody else do it. If you need help with taxes, have somebody else do it. I don't know why you're doing that stuff. Be a chiropractor. There's things that are important that you can delegate. So that's going to be the rule. So back to the original point, be thankful, be grateful. Express that, whether it's big or small, express it. If it's a big thank you, then do a big thank you. If it's a small thank you, do a small thank you. I will say this about thank yous. Don't bribe people to leave you reviews. That is a no-no. It is not acceptable. Years ago, it was perfectly fine. Google didn't care. Nobody cared. Google cares very much now. You do not, absolutely not supposed to bribe people to leave reviews. But I don't know if after the fact, there's a problem with saying thank you. I mean, there isn't. I would say there's not a problem with saying thank you. There's probably not a problem even with expressing that thank you as in some sort of gift, assuming that you didn't tell someone that that's what you were going to do. But I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't even do that with reviews. I would just say thank you. Just make sure when someone leaves your review, you comment on the review online, so you're publicly doing it. You could even copy it, paste it on social, publicly thank them on social media, and people get to see the cool review. And then just make sure next time you see them, or get on your phone and send them a text message and say, hey, I saw you left a review. I really appreciate it. Simple thing to do, but don't bribe them. It's against the rules. And then the last thing, do what you're good at, delegate what you're not. All right, guys, thank you. Thank you for listening to this series. If you made it this far, you are a champion. You are a warrior. I've talked about so many things in this particular series that there's so many things to think about, and I didn't even really get into super practical stuff most of the time. I was just saying, hey, these are things you have to think about. It can be super overwhelming to be a chiropractor. There's always more things to do when you have time. The reality is that when you're first getting started, you're so unqualified and ill-equipped to be successful. And I would just say this, it's like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. Just identify what's most important right now. Not what's most important 5 years from now. What's most important right now? And start doing those things. Be consistent. Schedule time. Don't find time to do important things. Make time. Schedule time. Be consistent. All the boring stuff that doesn't sell seminars. Listen to this podcast series a few times. What are the things where you think, hey, this is the most beneficial to me? I'm going to listen to that a few times to really get that into my head so that the thoughts and the things that we talked about in this podcast series, those things are permeating into my habits and into my life, and they're actually making a difference. It's not just another podcast that I listen to on my way to work that doesn't actually move the needle at all. This is very useful, very valuable concepts that if you take them to heart, they will become the foundation for the successful practice that you want to have. Once again, if you want more help, check out my Next Step program. If you want a better website, check out Rocket Chiropractic websites. I will talk to you on the next episode. See you guys.